Today, Labor reintroduced its signature $10 billion housing bill after it was blocked by the Coalition and the Greens. This was the message from Housing Minister Julie Collins.
We want those opposite and the Greens to join us and the crossbench to pass this bill. We want you to join the community housing providers who want this bill passed.
All right, let's bring in our political panel. Labor MP for Parramatta, Andrew Charlton, and National Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie. Welcome to you both on this sitting week in Canberra. Andrew, is this being reintroduced so that Anthony Albanese can have the option of an early election at the start of next year?
No, it's being reintroduced because it's incredibly important for Australia right now. Let me give you a real-life example of why this policy is so important. In New South Wales alone, there are more than 50,000 families on the social housing waiting list, people waiting for a home. And those people wait on average more than 10 years. In my electorate alone, there are 2,000 of those families on that wait list. And I was in my electorate last week opening a new social housing development, and the developer of that social housing development said that they could do dozens more just like that, helping families off the waiting list if this policy is passed. That's what we need to do, and that's why we've reintroduced it.
Well, Bridget, given that there is such a crisis in housing, people don't have a place to live, they're really struggling, especially the most vulnerable, why won't the Coalition support this?
Well, Sharri, this is a really bad way to solve the housing crisis. I mean, on one hand, Labor's talking up a housing crisis while simultaneously bringing in an additional 1.5 million people into our already overcrowded cities. They've delayed setting up a planning ministers meeting for over their first 12 months in government with state ministers, which is actually where the rubber hits the road in terms of opening up the supply side of the housing market. And this housing fund is on borrowed money. So at a time when we've got a cash rate through the roof, these guys are shelving out in excess of $300 million a year just to pay back the interest of the money they're borrowing to build a handful of houses. So this isn't the best way to solve the housing crisis, and we won't be supporting it.
Andrew, doesn't Bridget have a good point there that Labor's high immigration agenda is only making this housing crisis worse?
Well, Bridget has a great point that a lot of this is state responsibilities, and planning is a really important part of the housing solution. And the states are getting on with some of those planning proposals that will unleash new housing stock and enable new development. But the Commonwealth does have a role, and it's important that the Commonwealth doesn't vacate the field, which seems to be what the Liberals' policy is in relation to the housing crisis. And the Commonwealth's role is to unleash a wave of new housing through this Housing Australia Future Fund that will take the pressure off the housing stock, that will provide lots more houses for people to move into and take the pressure off social and affordable housing.
All right, let's move on to treaty. Labor, the Prime Minister, has promised that treaty wouldn't be part of the referendum, but in the Labor Party's draft national platform that was exclusively in the Australian today, it does reveal that the national platform that will be taken to the conference party room states that Labor supports all elements of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, including a constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament, a Makarrata Commission for agreement making, and a national process of truth-telling. But as we heard on Bedfordham just a couple of weeks ago, Anthony Albanese refused to link the voice referendum with the treaty. Here's a quick reminder of those comments.
As part of the Uluru Statement, we have a voice, we have treaty, we have truth-telling. As part of a treaty, won't there be compensation? If there is, I mean, that's not totally unexpected.
This isn't about a treaty, Ben.
But there are three parts of the Uluru Statement.
Yeah, and this is not.
So you're talking about the voice.
This is not about a treaty.
But as part of treaty, which we guess will be a following step.
This is not about a treaty.
Do you foresee that compensation would be paid?
This is not about a treaty.
And here was the PM on this issue today.
Do you support a treaty?
I look forward to, well, the processes are occurring.
But federally, you've committed to the Uluru Statement.
No, yeah, and it's not a treaty. It's like saying, do you support the sun coming up? It's occurring.
Bridget, what's your response to the Prime Minister's seemingly flip-flopping, backflipping on whether or not the party supports a treaty?
Yeah, it's very difficult to lead in the face of negative polls, and the Prime Minister has committed 34 times to implementing the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full. That includes treaty. It also includes a percentage of GDP for repatriations, etc., etc. And so for him to now be walking away from that, and we heard this morning his backflip, shows that he's not prepared to actually stand up for what he believes in. He either believes in implementing Uluru Statement from the Heart in full, or he doesn't. And he can't seem to tell the Australian people the truth. He's bought the T-shirt, he's gone to the concert. We all know that this treaty is going to be part of the Voice process. The Voice is being set up to implement treaty into the future. So for me, as always, Sharri, it's a very respectful no on the Voice to Parliament because of the unintended consequences that it will bring. And we've got a Prime Minister that cannot be straight on this issue with the Australian people.
Andrew, why can't he be straight? And you know, is there any problem in actually saying, yes, we are going to have treaty? And do you believe it is first the Voice advisory body and then the next step is treaty?
Honestly, I don't know why there's confusion on this. Let me be really clear. Labor supports the implementation of the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full. The first element of the Uluru Statement from the Heart is the Voice. Now, the Liberals don't want to talk about the Voice. They want to run, because their scare campaign on the Voice has completely run out of steam. They said that the Voice would affect interest rates. They said it would affect defence. They said it would affect parking tickets.
It will.
And now they don't have any more arguments. And so they're trying to change the topic away from the Voice onto the treaty. What Australians have to make a decision on later this year is whether we have a Voice to Parliament that recognises Indigenous people and ensures that we listen to them in the implementation of affairs that affect them. It's that simple.
Well, it's not that simple. It's that complex. I mean, this is a divisive change to our constitution, Andrew, that basic questions can't be answered about the unintended consequences by the Prime Minister or the Minister responsible. So great talking points, but the reality is this is a lot more complicated and going to have a lot more unintended consequences than the Labor Party is prepared to admit.
Bridget always says I've got great talking points when she doesn't have an answer to the point being made. And the point being made here is that the Voice is a simple proposition and the Liberals don't want to talk about it. Now they want to talk about anything else.
Happy to talk about the Voice.
They want to talk about treaty. They want to talk about any other thing because the scare campaign isn't working and Australians are realising that this is a simple, good-hearted proposition.
We did just hear those remarks that the Prime Minister made on Ben Fordham a few weeks ago where he says this isn't about treaty, but you've just said Labor does support treaty. So, you know, why won't the Prime Minister say what you've just said so clearly on this program?
The Prime Minister has been incredibly clear. He has said, we support the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full. He has also said that the decision before us this year is just about the Voice, which is the first step of implementing the Uluru Statement from the Heart. The Voice is what will be on the ballot paper for the referendum. That's what we have to discuss right now. That's the debate that we're having, and distractions about any other issue are completely irrelevant to that debate.
Andrew, you should be the one on RN answering questions on the Uluru Statement of the Heart. I think you're going to do a lot better job of the clarity argument than the Prime Minister has been of late.
Yeah.
I think the Prime Minister has been unbelievably consistent on this issue.
All right, let's move on to another topic. Dramatic scenes in the Senate last night when Green Senator Nick McKim unleashed on National Senator Matt Canavan over climate issues. Have a look.
Mate, you can shut your mouth. You can shut your mouth. People are dying.
Senator McKim, resume your seat.
And sociopaths like you.
Senator McKim,
I'm not going to cop interjections from sociopaths like Senator Canavan.
Senator McKim, resume your seat.
Bridget McKenzie, all the action happens in the Senate. This was very rude, though, very uncalled for language. What was this actually about?
This was debating climate change, obviously, and the role of fossil fuels. And Senator McKim was incredibly, almost unhinged, actually, in response to banter across the chamber, calling Senator Matt Canavan a sociopath. I have been in the Senate for a long time. I've seen some very robust discussions. We like to treat each other with respect whilst playing the ball, not the man, or in these modern day times, a woman. But that was just really uncalled for, incredibly unparliamentary. And I thought Senator Canavan handled it with his usual grace in terms of, being able to say he, in these housing crisis, he's living rent-free in the Greens' heads, because they seem to get very triggered by Senator Canavan, a man and a senator that's unashamedly standing up for rural and regional jobs and industries in the face of a tough transition to net zero.
Andrew, I'm interested in your view on the RBA's decision to keep rates on hold again, second month in a row. Economists seem to be split about whether or not they should have lifted. And then we're also seeing some coalition MPs trying to urge Peter Dutton to oppose, the government forcing the RBA to have dual mandates of full employment and inflation. And this, of course, is a recommendation that came out of the RBA review. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the rate pause yesterday was really good news for lots of Australian families. I think we all agree on that. The rate pause doesn't make life any easier for families under pressure, but it doesn't make it any harder. And most importantly, the rate pause is a strong vindication for the Treasurer's plan and the government's plan to bring down inflation. And we're already seeing inflation coming down. It's half the rate that we were left by the Liberals. And that means that the RBA has a lot more room to not lift interest rates so strongly. And that's welcome news for Australian families. In terms of your question on the joint mandate,
the dual mandates, yeah.
We are seeing that come into practice right now. We're seeing the government and the RBA do a good job of focusing on both price stability and employment. We've got inflation coming down, but employment holding. And that is the essence of that dual mandate.
All right, we've got to go. We're out of time. Thank you both very much, Bridget McKenzie and Andrew Charlton, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.